Well, it's an honor to be with former ambassador, former deputy foreign minister of Israel, and a friend, Danny Ayalon. Danny, welcome to All Israel News.
Thank you so much, Joel. Always great to be with you.
And I want to thank you as we begin this interview, one of the first interviews we're doing for All Israel News. I want to thank you for joining the All Israel News Advisory Board. You have been somebody who's advised me on U.S.-Israeli relations, Israeli regional relations, and global relations for as long as I met you. You were the ambassador to the United States when we first met, and you've just been a fount of many blessings and insights for me over the years.
Thank you very much, Joel. It's my honor to join this board. I think that your new project here is very, very important, and just Godspeed. And the harder you work, the better results, and the better we are. The Judeo-Christian heritage is strong, alive, and will be very, very successful in the future as it has been in the past.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think that, as you know, because you've dealt with it so much over an entire career in diplomacy and foreign policy, there's so much anti-Israel bias. Obviously, there's anti-Semitism, but there's also anti-Christian bias, anti-Muslim bias, anti-peace bias. And it's not that all journalists are doing a bad job. In fact, there's many really, really good ones, but many people don't know where to sort of find those good journalists and good articles. And I hope that All Israel News can be a source, a one-stop shop source for people to come and hear exclusive interviews like this, original reporting, but also connect to the good stories, the helpful stories, even though they may be controversial and the stories might not be good news, but they're still important and they're true.
This is so important, Joel. Israel is a great country and great achievements in terms of technology, in terms of economy and culture. We are in a very strong position here in the Middle East, also to be extending our hands in peace to help and share with others as we do. But there's one disadvantage where we are being exploited in a way and being beaten down. And this is in the field of what we call hasbara, or in the field of PR or public diplomacy. I call it a political warfare that unfortunately our enemies have waged on us with the aim of isolate Israel, just render it a pariah state. And this is part of the war that they engage in order to really destroy Israel and the Jewish people. We have radical Islamist forces, Palestinian Authority, and other leaders of the Palestinians have not yet come to terms or come to grips with the reality, which would be good for their people to make peace with Israel. And peace is not just a piece of paper. Peace is a real change of attitudes, really deep down currents that would be changed, and to make really a reconciliation, historic reconciliation. Peace is coexistence, peaceful coexistence. This is where we would like to see the Palestinians come to the table. Let's think of the future of our children and their children, and not just try to score points all the time. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not all or nothing. This was the approach of successive Palestinian leaderships, for over 100 years. The all or nothing, they never want to recognize, they never want to share. We were ready to share. We are still ready to share the land with them, but they're not ready to do that. They're not really for building a Palestinian state, which, by the way, has never existed in history. More than they want to build their state, they want to destroy ours, and this cannot be. So what we do is very important.
Let's talk in a moment here about this dramatic new peace development, peace treaty that's emerging between the state of Israel and the United Arab Emirates, the first in more than a quarter of a century. But first, I want to just take one more moment on this issue of media, because I think there are some in the media who are biased. Some journalists and news outlets maybe are sloppy, or they just don't even care about Israel or the Middle East generally, so they don't give much attention to it. But there are some who actually are engaged in an ideological war. I think you could point to Al Jazeera, for example, and other certainly Iranian media, increasingly Turkish media. Just take a moment to talk about the ideological warfare in the media against the state of Israel and Israel's friends and potential friends in the Arab world.
Yeah, by the way, also I would add to this infamous list also Russian TV. They also just take any and every opportunity to defame Israel, to criticize it in a very unfair and biased way, because they do not really look at the real complexity of the situation, or even the facts themselves. There are so many detailed facts, so it is very easy to skew the panoramic view, if I may. And this is where the Palestinians have so many allies to this, I would say, criminal review and reporting of what's happening here in the Middle East. And again, this is part of their warfare. And unfortunately, they have too many members that support them, whether the Iranians, whether it's the Hezbollah, Muslim countries, of course, many Arab countries. So here the quantity makes a quality. They have a bombardment from all over. And then to add, to this is the media in the West, which many times does take the I would say the approach or the attitude of the Palestinians, or even radical Islam against Israel. And Israel is the only real democracy in the Middle East. So I would think that all the liberal media in the West, whether it's in the United States or in Europe, would really applaud Israel, look at it as a model for other countries to follow. We do not want to be the only country of democratic conduct here, but only the first one. Others would join. Sure. Instead of that, they are bashing us, either because of lack of professionalism, not looking into the details, either because they are bombarded by the others, or there's pressure from the other side. And this is really not doing any service, not to their viewers, and certainly not to better relationship between the peoples here in the Middle East and in the world.
Well, let's talk about that in particular, because two decisions made by President Trump have been very controversial and certainly widely criticized by the media in the West and around the world. One was the decision by President Trump to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem in fulfillment of a law that was on the books in the United States since the mid-1990s, signed into law, as I understand, by President Clinton. So it was a bipartisan decision, and yet no American president had done it. And there was widespread criticism in the media and among many Middle East analysts that this would be very damaging to the cause of peace. And then, of course, President Trump's vision for peace, the plan that he rolled out early in 2020, again, to harsh criticism and almost a unanimous view, that this would retard or make more difficult peacemaking in the region. Tell us why the United Arab Emirates, in your view, has gone against all the conventional wisdom and made peace with Israel, because you have been in the room. You were at Y River Plantation. You've been in the thick of negotiations with the Palestinians for many years, working both for several prime ministers and in your role as ambassador and as deputy foreign minister. You've seen the efforts that Israel has made to offer pretty generous, although it's not as generous as they want, but very generous peace plans to the Palestinian leadership. Why do you think that now the UAE has decided, okay, look, we still support the Palestinians, but we're not waiting for them forever?
Joel, the short answer is President Trump. Because of President Trump's involvement, encouragement, we can see Arab countries, and I believe the United Arab Emirates is only the forerunner to many others to follow. And what did President Trump do is nothing short of really historic. What did he do? He came after 5 presidents who tried the same thing over and over again.
Both parties.
Yes. We're not talking partisan politics here. There were 5 presidents for the last, I would say, 30 so years, who tried the same thing, tried to bring the Palestinians together and have peace in the Middle East. And they tried the same paradigm over and over again, which was, let's have peace with the Palestinians, Israel and the Palestinians, and later bring the Arab countries to join. Well, that gave the Palestinians a veto power because of their intransigence, because they did not want to negotiate in good faith. They did not want to make any concessions. By having this old paradigm of waiting for the Palestinians to make a move and recognize Israel and do favors, quote unquote, to Israel, that kept the entire process pretty much defunct. And with Trump did 2 things. First of all, he said, well, we cannot do the same thing over and over and expect a different result. So let's try and do something else. Since we do not want to give the Palestinians the veto power, let's work from the outside in. That means not wait for the Palestinians to indulge us and recognize and make peace and then bring the other countries. Let's do it the other way around, so we are not just waiting and kept hostages by the Palestinians, because the region itself has so many larger interests coming from security. The real threats from Iran and from elements like Hezbollah and ISIS, radical Islam like Al-Qaeda. Sure. This is a real threat and killing hundreds and thousands of people. Secondly, there is a real, I would say, existential threat in terms of hospitability. Having a hospitable, a region. Most of our region is desert, and that means that the countries here are dependent on other sources, outside sources, for water and water availability, for food security, and this thing, cannot wait. So by realizing that, first of all, when you make peace, that brings stability, that brings economic cooperation, and then brings technological share for the benefit of everyone. And with Israel and UAI making this peace, and which has been really initiated and supported by Trump's administration, everybody gains, because first of all, it deters Iran and deters the radical elements from attacking all countries in the region. It's not just Israel that has been attacked. Every regime in the area has suffered from Iranian, the Ayatollahs, and from radical Sunni Islam. Right. So this is a great deterrence for stability. And secondly, and you know, Joel, that Israel is very advanced when it comes to high technology. And we are really, because I guess lack of natural resources, we have always excelled in research and development, and we are at the forefront of many, many fields which can really keep our region livable. And we have state-of-the-art technology in terms of food security, making sure that you can grow anytime, anywhere, not being dependent on the seasons, not being dependent on precipitation. There's many, many great technologies.
It's really an extraordinary breakthrough that Israeli companies have made in the private sector with drip irrigation, computerized irrigation, really managing the water usage to keep it very minimal and having maximum production. It feels to me, I will say, very much in fulfillment of a Bible prophecy about Israel will make the deserts bloom. And sure enough, we have seen that. For interest of time, Ambassador Ayalon, Let's wrap this interview for today, and we'll pick this up again. I want to talk to you about, the peace process, and particularly the open door now to Israeli businesses to economic and financial cooperation with United Arab Emirates businesses. Let's do that on tomorrow's interview. I'm Joel Rosenberg in Jerusalem.